Father, thank you for this time that we have together. Please be with us tonight as we conduct the business of the county. Help guide us and move us in the right direction. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If the commissioners would review the agenda, I seek a motion for approval.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir, Commissioner Eaker.
I make the motion we approve the agenda as presented.
Okay, do we have a second? Thank you, Commissioner Crump. All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0. At this time, we have public comments. There's 3 people that have signed up, but they've all 3 signed up about lake algae. And if they are the people that have signed up to do the presentation, we'll have a chance to do that. So at this time, the presentation on restoring and preserving Baden Lake, presenter is David Holton, along with Edgar Miller, along with Brian Henry. If you would come up and make your presentation.
Audio-visual picture of the algae problem that we have. I'm sure you all are aware of it as well. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Thank you very much for allowing us to come and speak with you. I'm David Holton, and I'm heading up a group of community volunteers who have been over the last 2 years or so looking for ways to solve the algae problem that we have on our lake in Baden and also in Tuckertown. And I want to thank Tyler for allowing us to be arranged for the meeting. And with me tonight is Edgar Miller, who is right over here. Edgar is with the River Keeper. He's the executive director of the Yadkin River Keepers and the River Keeper itself. And also I have with me tonight Carter Henning, who is president of Sea and Shoreline, which is the third-party company we're using to actually do the remediation and the cleansing of the lake. Up till now, we've been gathering information and doing the research, doing the lab studies, identifying the kinds of algae we have in our lakes and where the locations are. We've been working with the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality very closely. We've been working with Cube Hydro of the Carolinas very exclusively. We've visited with Montgomery County Commissioners, and we've gotten some support from them as well. We've also been to the Raleigh to visit with all of our state legislators, elected officials, county senators and representatives, and we've been to Washington to talk to our senators and representatives in Washington. It's a very comprehensive plan we have, and you'll be glad to know we're not asking for any money or anything like that from you tonight. We just want to share information with you, tell you what we've been doing, get you understanding what we're doing, and then begin to put you on our list of people to keep informed. And at some time we may ask for some help, and that help would probably come in the lines of saying, yes, we understand what they're doing. It's a very supportive program, and we support it for our community as well. That's our goal tonight, okay? So with that, let me just go ahead and introduce Carter, the president. Brian Henry was going to be here, but he had another conflicting meeting, so Brian flew in from Florida to attend this meeting in his stead. So, Carter?
Yeah, thank you so much. Really appreciate you letting us come up here tonight. I've got a PowerPoint presentation of the handout in front of you. Is there a trick to unlock the computer? Perfect.
So, do you have
Yes, yes. All right, perfect. Name's Carter. The organization is Scene Shoreline, and what we do is we try to figure out where 1 + 1 = 3. We find issues with water bodies that can be managed or controlled through beneficial ways to improve water quality, water clarity, improve recreation, increase fisheries, and habitat. I love the outdoors, grew up on the water. I think it's incredibly important for younger generations and people to become engaged. And without good water quality, without good areas to swim, we're going to lose generations of people that engage with the water. So who we are a full-service environmental restoration firm. I'm an underwater farmer or biologist, grow seagrass, mangrove, coral, and oysters throughout the Southeast and Caribbean. And what we're trying to do is find nature-based solutions. And so that marries a problem with a community that can become engaged around it. So once the problem is fixed, they can continue those beneficial methods moving forward and then look for funding, whether that's through a variety of different grant sources. So we've been doing this for a while. We got started in 2014. We've got over 150 environmental restoration projects that have changed from algae-dominated systems back into plant-dominated systems. We've won national awards, and what we've really been able to do is galvanize communities and make that transformation between algae, dirty water to clear water, and then bring in the public and the local elected officials and state and representatives so that everyone's engaged in the process, right? So the biggest thing for us is stakeholder engagement, making sure that everyone knows what's going on, why we're trying to achieve these things, and how do you get there. So we are throughout the Southeast, and we hire local folks, right? That's what my biggest enjoyment is getting people that are may not have jobs in that community through environmental restoration or habitat enhancement or ecotourism, but something has changed in that water body, and so now it generates jobs in that community. We've seen tour boat operators, we've seen guides, fishing guides, ecotourism, and really create a lot of jobs besides the actual restoration. So like Mr. Holton mentioned, we're not here asking a check from y'all. What we're trying to do is bring money, outside monies, into these communities and creating these sustainable habitats. This is an example of a project we've done in Crystal River, Florida. It is the same exact algae as what's currently on Baden Lake. It's Lyngbya woolli. And it's kind of funny, when we started working in Crystal River, I actually had some colleagues working up on Baden Lake and some of the other areas, lakes up here, on the Lyngbya issue. Essentially what we did is had a 80-acre project footprint, and the footprint of the restoration project expanded out to over 900 acres. So the goal of what we're trying to achieve is creating that snowball effect of nature-based solutions and letting the project run out. So it's not the cost of 1 acre, it's how many acres will snowball off the initial acre that you do. In order to do that, we typically use plants. So there's a process of a succession between an algae-dominated system and a plant clean water-dominated system. That nature hates a vacuum, so the nutrients go somewhere, and you can either absorb them with algae, dirty water, or you can convert those into plants and biomass. One of the things that has come along in the industry is a shortcut. And rarely are there shortcuts in environmental restoration, but we're extremely excited to be partnering with a technology company that's done something really remarkable. And they use ultrasound frequencies that are inaudible to the human ear. They don't disturb fish. They don't disturb bugs. What they do target is the algae-specific cells. And how they do it is very similar to an opera singer, right? Everyone's got the picture in their mind of an opera singer can shatter a wine glass by just creating a certain frequency with their note. And so what this organization has done is they've mapped out the size of these floating cells, right? The vacuoles, the air pockets in algae, and they can curve the ultrasound wave around that cell, that vacuole, to where it implodes on itself in the algae molecule, or the algae sinks down to the bottom. It sounds crazy. Shipping industry has been doing this for over 20 years on steel hull ships for biofouling. And in wastewater treatment plants, they've been using it for over 10 years. Typically, in those different systems, you have very unique algae. This organization put the time in to map out all these different cell walls of all these different algae so that they can target bad algae. These floating algae like Lyngbya wolli, which is in Baden Lake, and some of the other floating planktonic ones that cause harmful algae blooms, cause some of the dermatitis and some of the skin rashes. And so what's really fun about this product, and I said it was a shortcut, and it really is because it's a shortcut from being able to improve water quality to be able to get that self-sustaining grass meadow established that is your perpetual long-term solution to combat algae blooms long-term. So we're incredibly excited about this. It's been proven throughout North America, and there's plenty of literature that's come out on large lake, smaller lakes. And this is going to be one of the premier and most unique case models for actually dam restoration or large water bodies. So we're incredibly excited about some of this technology. Typically, they've used it in golf course ponds and wastewater treatment facilities. And frankly, just met them at a conference or a trade show, and it was just so unique of what they were doing and their ability to do it and to be able to scale that vision up so that municipalities don't have to spend the tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars in stormwater upgrades or septic to sewer conversions down the road to get less harmful algae blooms in their water body. And I'm not saying that septic to sewer and stormwater improvements are not important. They really are. But being able to have that shortcut or a stopgap to reduce those algae blooms until the infrastructure comes along is really more of a game changer in the solution. So how does it work? Well, we talked about how it works, how that ultrasound beams burst the cell walls so it can't float, sinks down to the bottom. It works like a flashlight, so it's got to have line of sight so that the sound molecule works. It's not sound molecule. The sound wave works and is able to trap it. It works at about a 15-acre radius each station for Lyngbya, for different types of floating out or not suspended algae, phytoplankton blooms. I think it'll go out to almost 60 acres or 50 to 60 acres, depending on a couple different algae species. So it's a very scalable model. Typically, you'll see algae blooms specifically of the Lyngbya, that black snotty algae in Baden Lake. It thrives on anoxic conditions. So in areas with very low dissolved oxygen, those are in areas of coves, areas where you get cold creeks running out, areas that may receive a lot of debris after storms, and all that material starts breaking down over time. And so what this will allow for is a stopgap to reduce those algae from growing up in the winter, or excuse me, in the spring, winter, spring, and then really kind of taking over in the summer. So we're incredibly excited about that. There's plenty of testimonials. There's tons of results on numerous smaller golf course ponds and smaller HOA lakes. I think the biggest one they've got right now is about 75 acres, which is impressive in its own ways. And if there's any questions about ultrasound safety, if there's any questions on biological monitoring, they've got tons of third-party, peer-reviewed, independent, processed information out there. But I think that the main takeaway is that they can control what types of algae to target with the frequency of the sound wave. So it's not going to turn the lake into a sterile swimming pool. It's just not. It'll get rid of those harmful algae blooms that grow up in that density that cause human health problems. And then the longer-term solution of getting submerged aquatic vegetation and plants established there to create that nutrient buffer that also slows down erosion and sediment resuspension that really feeds and drives algae blooms. The plants, I just cannot stress how the process and is typically how we've had to do it in the past is do large dredging projects, high area, low volume dredging projects, and that'll be necessary in some areas of a lot of detrital material. So doing the vacuum removal of inorganic and organic sediments that are on the bottom feeding algae blooms. We cultivate native submerged aquatic plants, plant them, protect them in some cases. We deal a lot with manatees. It seems like if in areas with bad algae blooms, you know, there's never enough salad in the salad bowl, and so something's always coming to eat it, whether it's turtles, ducks, snails, deer, manatees, sea turtles. It's always something, and it's frustrating. So we'll protect it, and we're a little bit different than most folks. Is we treat it like a farm. Like we're trying to cultivate these plants. It's not necessarily a science experiment for us. What the end of the day is, we want to make sure that the plants are there, and what we said would happen actually does happen. And there are certain times we've had to replant after hurricanes, plane crashes, boat groundings, and that's just what it is. And so, and then monitor. We've partnered with the Duke Collaboratory, and looks like they are going to help fund some of the monitoring and to really hammer out the process. So let the scientists do what they do best, and that's articulate really fine granular level stuff, and let the restoration proceed for those algae to clean water situations. So when we dredge, typically we do diver-directed dredging, because what we're trying to do is get to the organic material off the top of that hard substrate. And so by having someone down there that actually knows the organic compaction level, you reduce the amount of material that you have to pull out of an area. So at the end of the day, we tell our divers, if you can hide your hand in the muck, you got to keep going. Usually you want it 1 to 4 inches deep of organic material or less. And that's really how deep the roots and the rhizomes of the plants go. So if it's too soft and unconsolidated, any wave or anything trying to eat that plant, it'll erode that plant away, or wash it away, or pull it up. And so by getting those plants established, creates that permanent carpet. And bank stabilization. So there'll be certain areas where we look forward to engaging with the local community and the residents and the homeowners, and figuring out in the strategic areas of where is material getting eroded away at higher rates, these big exposure events, and how do we keep trees on the bank, keep that buffer from nutrients just flying right into the water body. And so working with the community on living shorelines and bank stabilizations, whether that's through vegetated retaining walls or just traditional shoreline protection. And the most important part is always community outreach, letting the community be engaged in the process of the restoration, making sure that everyone knows what's going on, why we're trying to do these things, and everyone have just knowledge. And that's probably I love that. We've set up curriculums through on bringing grasses into classes and letting elementary schools be able to grow out their plants and incorporate that into the curriculum so that future generations know how these water bodies work, how they're not isolated systems, and a little bit about the nature all around them. And with that, I'll turn it over to Edgar Miller with the Yadkin Riverkeeper and his long-term programs. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carter. As Carter said, I'm Edgar Miller. I'm the Executive Director and Riverkeeper for Yadkin Riverkeeper. We're based in Winston-Salem, and our mission is to protect and enhance the Yadkin River, water quality in the river, its lakes and tributaries for the public benefit of recreation and drinking water supplies. Just in the interest of time, I'll skip some of the background, but I did want to just give you all background on YRK. We do have about 300 members watershed-wide. We have obviously a very large watershed, the second largest watershed in North Carolina, which not only includes about 180 miles of free-flowing river above High Rock Lake. I'm from Davidson County in Lexington and lived and grew up on High Rock Lake, so pretty familiar with the issues that are impacting all of the Yadkin PD lakes. And the algae issue particularly came to our attention back in 2018 when our riverkeeper at the time, Brian Fannin, was called to investigate the black floating mats on Baden Lake, and it was positively identified as Lingbaia. According to the most recent state surveys, Cube Hydro surveys, that algae is growing and increasing its acreage coverage, which I think in Baden Lake is right around almost 700 acres now, in Tuckertown, which of course is a smaller reservoir, not quite as many acres, but a much greater percentage of that reservoir is being impacted by this harmful algal species, which can, as Carter alluded to, cause health impacts on humans and wildlife and pets. We've had a couple cases on High Rock that have been associated with some different types of algal blooms, but suspected pet deaths as a result of that. So, you know, it's a great concern when you're dealing with a recreational resource like the Yadkin PD Lakes, and I'm looking forward to the next presentation to hear more about what's going on with Parks and Rec here in Stanley County. We also were involved when there was a harmful algal bloom on High Rock in 2019 that resulted in both Rowan and Davidson County health departments issuing swim advisories in the middle of the summer season when these things typically occur later in the season, warmer water temperatures, lower water levels. So we knew that was a problem for our lakes. It's not just a problem in the Yadkin PD basin, but it's really a nationwide problem, as Carter's firm has got a lot of experience trying to deal with this in the Southeast in particular. EPA does not have standards for cyanotoxins in water. Lingbaia is a cyanobacteria, not technically an algae, but it does produce toxins that, as I said, can be harmful. And so we began working on that problem. We worked with the state to set up a reporting dashboard. So if you have a fish kill or a bloom in your community, you can send that into the state and they will send someone to sample and investigate. We also want to see increased monitoring of these things in our lakes and rivers. And I have to give Cube Hydro some credit here.
They have a technical advisory group on harmful algal blooms, and they are surveying and actually doing a pilot project using an algaecide, which, you know, may work in some small settings, but we feel like the more natural solutions, the restoration solutions that Sea and Shoreline are experts at, really fits this situation much better. But, you know, this is just the beginning of this problem. And of course, with the floods that we had last week, the river up in Davie County, near where I live, it rose 25 feet in a day. And so that storm was sort of unprecedented at this time of the year, but certainly overdevelopment and loss of river buffer and stream buffers throughout the watershed are creating the kind of debris. I mean, we've always, High Rock, Baden have always had problems with log debris after huge storms, but if anyone's seen the lakes and the western side of the lakes over the last week, you know what I'm talking about. And so that may end up being a bigger problem for us long term. If you've paddled on the upper river, you see the huge trees just hanging on by their root balls, and so you know more is coming. And so we are advocating for stronger buffer rules in the Yadkin River watershed. We are advocating for reduction in nutrient and sediment pollution that brings a lot of the nutrients to High Rock, which then goes under the dam and goes to Tuckertown and Baden, where they fuel these algae blooms. So we feel like we've got a chance to solve this problem, not only to reduce the things that are causing the problem from upstream, but also hopefully address the problems here that we're experiencing on the lakes that could potentially impact recreational use, and I think from a county government perspective in particular, property tax revenues and property values, if this continues to be an ongoing problem. So David Holton from Montgomery County, who spoke earlier, is on the Yadkin River Keeper Board. He has brought this issue to our board. We have passed a resolution of intent to work on this problem and make this a priority. We support the work of the local Restore Baden Lake group, and we have also folks here from Tuckertown Reservoir that are concerned and have a similar problem. So it's a regional problem, and we hope to help coordinate the response here, to do stakeholder outreach, the outreach component that Carter talked about being extremely important, and ultimately get this problem under control in a manageable way so it doesn't affect the long-term use of the lakes. So happy to answer any questions. Get Carter back up here if y'all have any.
I do have a question. I live on Lake Tillery. I hadn't heard anything about Lake Tillery, but I do know there's some type of algae or grass that's growing in coves where the water's not moving, you know, very much, and it thrives during the summer. I'm not sure what you call it.
Yes, sir. Depending on what you saw there, there's also there's algae that's kind of a the Lyngbya algae will kind of make spirals or spires. That's part of it. There's a variety of different submerged plants. Some not good for the lake, and some are really good for the lake. And so managing stakeholder or just communicating with stakeholders, what plants you're putting in, which ones are the good ones, which ones are the bad ones, and then how the homeowner or the golf course or whatever is on the lake, just communicating that, I think is really important from a stakeholder outreach, so everyone knows what you're trying to achieve and everyone's on the same sheet of music.
Yeah, I think that is the native willow vegetation that's mostly on Tillery. We've had a hydrilla issue. Yeah, hydrilla. And we're seeing that on High Rock now, particularly at the boat ramps, because people take their boat from Tuckertown or Baden and bring it up to High Rock and bring the hydrilla with them. There again, Cube has had a pretty successful mitigation project, so if you do have a concern about hydrilla, of course, that Lake Tillery is managed by Duke Energy. So I need to talk with John down there about that. And Duke has a very aggressive aquatic vegetation program as well, introducing a lot of different carps. But I think most of that is the favorable native aquatic plants like Carter and his team would be putting into High Rock.
But
and
not the
Baden.
hydrilla.
Not the
Just
hydrilla.
to be
right.
clear.
Yeah, he's not bringing hydrilla.
I have a friend who lives in a cove, and it got so bad this summer, he couldn't even get his boat out.
I will mention, though, that you brought it up. So one of the things that we're working on is this picture with the manatee. That manatee was in an area, was the first place in the U.S. hydrilla was found. It'll be the first place in the U.S. that it's been eradicated naturally. So years and years of spraying it, carp, it just built up over time. You get these mucky deposits, and then they get the algae blooming there. And so we were able to take care of the algae and create it into a self-sustaining perennial plant that's good for the environment, and you can drive your boat through. So
Do you all have a name of a person and a phone number that I could pass along to my friend? That he might get some
Yeah,
help
you can
from?
have him call me, Edgar Miller.
Do you have a card, Mr.
Yeah,
Miller?
I can get you my card. Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Thank you.
What's your number? Can you give us your cell
Yeah,
number?
it's 336-688-2651. And like I said, I kind of live in the middle of the whole watershed, so I spend a lot of time between Elkin and Baden and Albemarle. And, you know, it's just, these lakes are such important resources for us, not only drinking water, but also the recreational use of the lakes, that I'm hopeful that there's still time to solve this problem, but we have to reduce the inputs coming in from upstream, and we have to deal with what's already on the ground or in the lake downstream. What's that? Yeah, it is, and, you know, I could let Gil speak to his efforts, but Gil Newsom here, some of you may be familiar with the Newsom Road and the Newsom community that is partially underwater now as a result of the reservoir being built back in the 60s, but yeah, he has worked diligently to try to reduce it there, but it's a bigger problem than even Gil could handle, right, Gil? Yeah.
Mayor, I have a couple of questions.
Yes, ma'am.
So this is basic, but I'm just so fascinated by the technology. Is this a one and done, or do you have to go in there with that
question.
ultrasound technology over and over?
it's a great question. And if there's ever a biologist that tells you, here's the start date and we're going to finish it on, hold on to your wallet, it'll be a slog if everything goes perfectly correct. And so, no, this is not a one and done project. To be very specific, our goal is to work in areas that it's currently growing in, like Tuckertown, Tillery, and these other lakes, and then continue to expand that footprint out so you don't have that downstream recruitment. And so figuring out where the sources are, and then so that you don't have to chase the problem all across the watershed. So, no, ma'am, when we go into projects, we want to have a good relationship and see a long-term result. We typically try as hard as we can not to get ourselves in environmental boondoggles. We want to have a start date and a finish date where your schedule may be a couple days or months or years off, but you know, have a finite end goal in sight. So it's a long-term thing for us.
I mean, I would note that the ultrasound technology in a lake of this size is still largely unproven. So we don't really know, but one of the things that appealed to me about Sea and Shoreline, we were getting approached by a lot of different algae mitigation firms. I mean, there are tons of them out there. And the restoration process with the native aquatic plants is what really impressed me about them, because I think that is a more sustainable solution long-term. Like Carter said, you're going to have things impacting that you're going to have to go back in and fix. This ultrasound technology is new, and so this would be a pilot project that we would initiate hopefully this spring, once we get all the logs out of the coves, maybe. But you know, it hopefully will, like he said, accelerate that process. It's not going to be a magic bullet. We know it's worked some areas, so we would be hopeful that it could work here too.
Okay.
But yeah, I don't know if that's, once again, that's just totally new, so it's hard to say whether they'd have to come back in and keep, or do those in perpetuity. David, did you wanna? Whether or not the ultrasound machines would have to be in the water for,
Well, I think the problem is we have, it is still coming over the dam from
That's
Tucker
right.
Town, so new stuff will be floating in.
Right.
And then there'll be other, we can't treat everything on day one, so we'll be treating some areas, but some areas will still be infected, and it'll break off and float around. So, you know, the idea of just because you kill it right here, it's just the rest of the environment is still hurting. So, but
Right.
fundamentally, those machines would probably stay in the water for a couple of years at least, and they're, but these machines are not, and, I mean, they're expensive, you know, $5,000, $10,000, $5,000, $8,000 a piece, but they'll cover, as you just saw, you know, 6 to 12 acres each. So we can, you know, our initial pilot that we're shooting for in March is gonna be between 12 and 15 units in selected areas where we know we can get the coverage.
Okay,
And that's gonna be funded by donations from homeowners in the community who are willing to put their money out there to test this up. But the bigger money for the restoration program is gonna come from North Carolina, and we've already got a commitment from from Representative Sasser and Senators Ford and Senator Craven to go to bat for us in the short session to put some funding together for a pilot of the restoration program. And we would hope to start that in the end of '24, if it all works well. So that's our game plan for the near term. We got community gonna put some money in it, test the concept, as Edgar said. Once we know it works, we will through the summer in that little area. Then we're gonna be getting the money from the state, and like I said, we've got commitments, and we've already talked, Sea and Shoreline's been up talking to senators in Washington, and they're Senator Budd, and so we've got them on board. They're gonna support us with that as well. So we got a plan, we're ready to go.
that's great. That was my other question about the funding, and you
well,
answered that.
the
Thank
state
you.
legislature did appropriate $600,000 to the Lake Gaston Weed Control Council, and that's not a narcotic intervention thing. It's a aquatic weed project. They have a more serious lingby problem than we have. But that's a quasi-governmental thing, and they got $600,000 for over the next 2 years from the state legislature to continue the chemical treatments. And that's one thing about the chemical treatments, they are also very expensive. I think they're doing 300 acres, and I think the price of that is about $1 million for the chemical treatment. That's putting, you know, algaecide, copper sulfate on the material, and that doesn't really work that well with
It's not
lingby
a
to begin
permanent
with.
solution. It's not even a quick fix.
What's that?
It's not a permanent solution or.
No, that exactly. And so,
It's
but there is
harmful.
precedent. There also, the House Technical Corrections Bill in the State House has expanded what the state can use its shallow draft funding for to address aquatic invasive nuisance weeds, and that includes now lingbyia. So that's been amended. It hasn't been passed by the Senate, and there's concern that there's not enough funding to address all these different problems across the state. But we are hopeful, and I think, you know, the precedent is there that the state is recognizing this is a problem, and they are willing to put some money into it.
Commissioner Shuta.
I just want to make a quick comment. I saw on there that one of the restoration lakes was Lake Istapoga in Florida. And I grew up there in Highlands County. And I'm very familiar with that lake. So I looked up the statistics. That lake is 45 square miles. It's like 4 miles by 10 miles. It's only like 4 foot to 10 foot deep. But we never went swimming there because there's a lot of alligators. And I looked it up there. There's literally, they have between 5,000 to 10,000 alligators in that lake. That's a lot. But it's just a lot of fishing and stuff like that. But I remember growing up, you went through the time where it was just all the muck there, all the
That's right.
crap there, the weeds showing up, and you just can't see if there's an alligator in there or not.
That's
and,
right.
and so we never went swimming there. I was impressed with the size of
Thank you.
it's the sixth largest lake in Florida, and that's pretty impressive that they're able to clean that up.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
can't do the math in my head, but I think Baden is about 5,000 acres. And so.
But the good news is it doesn't grow in all 5,000.
That's right, right.
It
And
needs sunlight
right.
in order to grow. So that's why you see it along the shoreline and in the coast.
More shallow
Out in the
areas.
middle, you don't have any problem. So don't get hung up on on that part of it. If you just look at the amount of, say maybe 30 feet out from the shoreline, along certain lines of the coast.
That's right.
That's what we're looking for. And so it's a very manageable project.
That's right.
Commissioner Hatley?
I'll make a phone call. I could ask questions all day. So
Okay.
I'll call you.
Okay, yeah.
Any other questions? Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you all.
Thank you
Appreciate
all for
your interest.
time very much.
Mine's not working either. Yeah, yeah. Is there, is Brad McLean,
Yes.
are you gonna speak?
No, sir, I just, I thought that was for the people attending the sign-in. My apologies.
That's okay, no problem.
Sir.
All right, the next presentation is the presentation of the impact of parks and recreation on the community. Presenter is Lisa Kaiser, who is the Director of Park and Recreation for the City of Albemarle. Welcome.
Good evening. Thank you. Thank you for your time, commissioners. I passed out some reports or some data reports at your dais there. So your first one is, so first off, wanted to thank you for your investment in Parks and Recreation for the county. I'm not sure if you've seen the statistics lately, but North Carolina is number 10 in the nation on their spending on recreation, and that's totaling $28 billion, and that's just from a consumer side. That does not count the investment that communities are making into their infrastructure of parks and recreation. So the first report, I have all of the Albemarle locations, and I did that as a chain, so it's gonna look a little bit different than your other reports. But for the time period of 2023, we saw 416,000 visitors to our parks in Albemarle. So on the back page, you'll see what those venues are. So it's Rock Creek, Chuck Moorhead, City Lake, Don Montgomery, Albemarle Soccer Complex, E.E. Waddell, Niven Center, and then we also have Rock Creek Pool in there. So underneath that, the visit trends, that'll show you the line graph of between January to December when we have our greatest. And as you can imagine, that's from April to July, August. So the next one is the year over year. We're seeing increases in our visitors to all of our parks, and that shows the percentage of change. And then again, the next one is our baseline. So we see most of our visitors between March and September and October. So then I pulled some of our county parks just to show you what your investment is going into. So the first one is Locust, and I did a year over year comparison. So that'll be your blue lines will be 2023 and your red lines will be 2022. So Locust saw 144,000 visitors to their park, which was a little down from 2022, but still our total parks, and if you add up all the visitors for 2023 were of the parks that I chose, it's 650,000 visitors. That doesn't even include Morrow Mountain, people going to Baden and Lake Tillery. So the other parks are year over year data. It's the same data, so I'll just point to you the visitors for this year. New London had 2,600 visitors. Oakboro had 87,000 visitors to their park. The one that doesn't have a name is Darrell Almond Park, and that one had 14,000 visitors. So that just shows you, and you have the data. We use this data for marketing, and then also it'll show us the time of day when visitors are using it. So of course, as you can imagine, later in the day after work, there's more visitors. But if we want to take and add programs to these parks and attract more visitors, we would do that normally where we see a lower amount of visitors coming in. So I also pulled a couple of events snapshots for you. So we have Food Truck Friday, and that's at City Lake Park, and we have 7 events from April to October. So the spreadsheet there, was 22. We had 9,700 visitors, and then for 2023, we went up to 10,008. So over a 10% increase. People are staying in that event for almost 2 hours. Again, you see the visit variance. And then there's also in these reports, where are people coming from? So it will show their travel routes. And also in these reports, you'll see the zip codes that they come from. So I know from Food Truck Friday zip codes and adding those zip codes up, 70% of attendees came from inside Stanley County, and then 30% came from outside of Stanley County. Then you can see where they go before and after. And then your last report would be year over year for our fall festival that we hold in downtown. So this year we saw 4,500 people attend that event. Yeah, that last year we had 2,900. So yeah, I think the weather has some to do with it, but so I think the year before on Halloween it was kind of cold and rainy. But again, thank you for your investment. People are using our parks, as you can tell, and it is a big economic driver here, not only here in Stanley County, but in our whole state.
Do we have any questions for Ms. Kaiser?
I just want to say thank you so much for putting this together. And it's pretty impressive when you look at the details here. And what I see is interesting is how you look at where the different parks pull from outside the county. You know, like Norwood pulls from Ansonville and Wadesboro, then Oakboro pulls a lot from Oakton and stuff like that. And then Locust, I looked at it, I don't have it in front of me, but that pulls from that area there. And I didn't look at all Albemarle where they pull from. And I want to give you kudos and credit for Food Truck Friday, because even this year the weather wasn't the best on some of those. You know, when it rains at like 5:30 and it starts at 6, and even though it clears up, it kind of kills the crowd. But I remember when that started during COVID, and you didn't have you just had the food trucks.
Correct.
And then the next year, it's like, I forget, is this the 3rd year y'all had it or 4th?
This past one was the 4th.
The 4th, and it's just how it's exponentially grown every year with Food Truck Friday. And the other thing that's pretty impressive here is seeing how long people stay at the parks. One I remember is like, I know it was 2 hours at that, but a lot of these other parks, they go down for like 40, 45 minutes at the time to stay at a park.
Yeah, they're probably walking the trails or, exercising of some sort. I know, depending on the park, I know like Don Montgomery, I can pull the data and was able to do that for the Wampus Cats and to show them their reach and their impact.
I was surprised that Rock Creek was the number. I was thinking it would be Chuck Moorhead, but I was surprised that Rock Creek was the number 1. I guess with all the different types of activities, especially with people walking the thing and pickleball.
Walking and pickleball.
It was nothing until pickleball arrived. You put those pickleball things up and it shot it to the top. But thank you so much. This is a very, very good and thorough presentation. I appreciate it.
Thank you again.
Commissioner Eford?
Ms. Kaiser, how do you determine the number of visits to a park?
So we're using Placer AI, and their Placer grabs that data from mobile cell phone locations.
And that's the same
So
way.
we have geofenced around all of our locations.
And that's the same way you get the zip codes where people are coming from.
Exactly.
Okay,
Exactly.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Barbie?
I'm sorry.
That was
I'm
my
sorry.
question, was how you compiled all this, so you're actually using the people's cell phone to do all this, collect this information and everything?
Well, I'm not personally. We have a subscription. Yeah, so we have a subscription to Placer AI, and they use cell phone data. Yeah, it's used in a lot of, I think it was originally done just in retail, so now Parks and Rec, Economic Development is all getting on that kind of bandwagon, if you will.
I think I'm very uncomfortably appreciative of that, but
I agree. I'm the same way.
Any other questions?
I'm glad you cleared it up. I thought Payne was down there with the clicker counting every one of them.
Thank you, Ms. Kaiser.
Thank you.
Okay, our next presenter is Candace Louder, our EDC Director. She's gonna tell us all about the EDC.
Good evening. Normally I come in front of you asking for something, but tonight I'm here to tell you a little bit about our department and our program of work. So I'm going to work on getting this slideshow pulled up. Bear with me. There we go. Very good. I'm Candace Louder, Stanley County Economic Development Director. I've been with Stanley County for almost 17 years. Very grateful for the opportunity that the county's given. We've had some great leadership. I've worked with 2 county managers, lots of iterations of commissioners, and I'm thankful for all the work that you all do. Our assistant, Anna Bridgman, she got married last year. She's been with our office for almost 3 years. She's great support for me. I really appreciate all the help that she provides us. We are small but lean, and we respond quickly, and I feel like we have a great level of customer service. So I jumped into who we are with our staff, but of course the governing body is our Board of Commissioners. The commissioners select 2 individuals from amongst yourselves to serve on our advisory board, and we're grateful this year that Commissioner Eford and Commissioner Ashuto will be joining us for our first meeting at the end of the month, and I'm grateful for them and their willingness to serve. Commissioner Lawhon and Barbie have been serving with us for the last couple years, and I do believe it's beneficial. If you ever have the opportunity to serve with our group, I do believe it's beneficial because, you know, we have a really great, diverse advisory board, and you all hear from me in closed session and an open meeting about sort of the project when we're about to close it. Usually, you know, we need to work out some final details, but the advisory board usually hears about projects in closed session under a code name usually, but they get sort of like the first look at what's coming down the line. So appreciate your willingness to serve on those on the board. The advisory board members are appointed by you, 2 per voting district on a rotating appointment cycle. So every year we have a representative from each district that's up for reappointment. They're 2-year terms. We have some long-standing board members. We have some that have just recently come on. We are thankful for the volunteer group that we have. They help us a lot, really sort of in the background. They advocate for projects, help me personally make connections. Because they're from all over the county and we have good representation from all over the county, they really help our office engage directly with the district that they're representing. So 9 times out of 10, if I don't know who to call in their particular area, then the advisory board member can help me make that connection. And really, connections is a huge part of our program of work. This is a busy slide because that's what my days normally look like. I never really know. I can have the best laid out day, But we get involved in a lot of things. I think probably what we're best known for is job creation and investment. Those are the things that make the headlines in the Stanley News and Press. Those are the things that we brag a lot about. Those are definitely performance indicators that we track internally year over year. But really, we get involved in a lot of things. We're not a community development organization. That's a little bit different. Community development gets involved in housing projects and some downtown revitalization. And the city of Albemarle does have an economic development office, but they lean more towards the community development stuff, whereas we are more of the traditional sort of industrial development roots. We do product development, product identification with real estate. We help business and industry connect with resources. That's a huge part of what we do, is brokering those connections. It can be small business entrepreneurs that need help creating a business plan or access to capital through a small business loan. It could be a huge infrastructure grant that they need help extending a sewer line to a building that's currently underserved or not served at all by public sewer. So we help broker the relationships, and then where appropriate, we are the sort of the applying organization when the county or public entity needs to be the recipient of those grant funds. And a lot of the programs that are available from the state for infrastructure, job creation, investment require that a local government be the applying partner. So our office is frequently, not always, but frequently a huge part of that application process. We get involved in quality of life. The two presentations we've had tonight certainly tap into the quality of life aspect. Tourism is big. Quality of life is serving on the land use committee with our planning and zoning department. I serve on the United Way board. We get involved with the Chamber of Commerce. So we not only want to get the businesses here, we want them to stay here once they're here. We want to help them grow in place. Commissioner Lawhon has told me so many times it's much easier to hang on and grow what you've got than try to recruit something new, and there's so much truth in that. We try to make at least one existing industry visit per week. That's an ambitious goal with a really wonky meeting schedule, so sometimes we'll get in 4 or 5 existing industry visits a month. Sometimes there may be 1 or 2. All of those performance indicators are tracked on a monthly report that we provide to our advisory board. And a lot of times that will prompt dialogue with our board about what's going on at certain companies. They're growing, they're shrinking, they're automating, they're expanding. And sometimes we even generate leads with our advisory board around those discussions. And some of that starts with the existing industry visits. So that's a very important part of what we do, is just staying dialed into what's going on. Also, we don't ever like to hear about closures, but it's much better for you all to hear about a layoff or a closure from us than hearing about it in the Stanley News and Press after a company's filed a warn notice, and we're the last to know. So we try to stay out in front of that, try to get in front of our leadership at our local industry. So if they do hit a snag, we can hopefully mobilize and save the company. We have had, not the company, but keep them here. There have been times that we have mobilized and gotten in front of company leadership and provided data and built a case for them to stay. And I'm proud of that work. That never makes headlines, but there were 2 instances during COVID that we were very close to a closure. And because of the data that we have access to with our partnerships and the relationships that we have with leadership at the companies, we were able to get in there quickly before they did the layoff or the closure. So I'm very thankful for the opportunities that our local businesses are willing to let us come in, even when they think that they don't need us, but they may need us in a year or 2 or 3 from now. So establishing that relationship and maintaining the relationship is really important. So part of what we do is recruitment, and a huge part of recruitment is telling our story. We all know that we love living here, we choose to live here, but why would a company want to pick up and move and bring their employees and their families and their livelihoods here? And so telling our story is a huge part of what we do. And how do we package that? How do we streamline that messaging depending on the audience that we're getting in front of? Understanding who the listener is and modifying the messaging to get their attention. is a huge part. It's not marketing in the purest sense, but marketing is a part of what we do. So these are questions that we regularly get asked on a request for information. We call those RFIs. So, you know, certainly real estate is a huge part of a location decision. We have to have a building or a site, or at the very least, a community that wants them here. What's the workforce look like? We have a legacy of manufacturing here in Stanley County. We've outperformed the region and the state in our percentage. Right now, manufacturing is fluctuating between 17 and 18% of our total workforce. We have a very strong manufacturing presence. They're generally high-quality jobs that are associated with manufacturing. They are becoming very skilled. You know, it's not the dirty factories that you think about from 100 years ago. Manufacturing has become very sophisticated, highly automated, highly technical, highly skilled. And so the community college, we lean on them tremendously to not only train our workforce and the workforce that's coming through the K-12 system for the jobs that they have ready right now, but they're also trying to crack the nut of, you know, they're trying to train a workforce for jobs that don't even exist yet. And that's a tall order. You know, how do you predict what's going to come? How do you predict what sectors are growing and shrinking? And there's a lot of data and research that our office is involved in through our regional partnerships. And so just telling the story about how the workforce has been historically, how we have retrained the workforce to adapt to the changing manufacturing space. Certainly agriculture is still big here. We have to get in front of what's coming down the line. And new technology grabs headlines, but there are certain things that you're always going to need. You know, people are going to have houses. People will, in our area at least in the near term, will always have cars. So, you know, how do we feed into that supply chain to make sure that the businesses that are here and that we are recruiting will be here for a long time? Do we have a business-friendly community? We talked about that. The tax landscape, that's a huge part of our submission. We rarely submit multiple sites for the same project, but we do occasionally. And very regularly, a company wants to understand what the tax landscape is. The county rate is just one piece of it. There's fire district taxes, as you know. Some states tax school districts separately. So these site selectors that may be out of state or worse, even out of the country, they have no idea about your community. And they're depending on us to tell them about our community in a way that they can understand. So we have to describe the tax landscape, create examples of how that looks. If they receive an incentive, we create a cash flow to show them what that looks like over 5 or 10 years. And so, you know, obviously taxes are a big deal. Quality of life, we touched on a little bit. Transportation, assets, and challenges. We have a great rail network here in Stanley County. We've got the Winston-Salem southbound that runs north-south. We can make connections to both major carriers, CSX and Norfolk Southern. We've got the Aberdeen, Carolina, and Western Railway, which is a short line provider in the southern end of the county. We've got Atlantic Railways running out of Baden Business Park. Rail is huge, and if you're moving big stuff, rail is a deal maker or a deal breaker. So the existence of our rail network is a huge asset. Challenges, you know, historically, we missed out on projects because we didn't have an interstate running through our county. That's not as big of a deal now because we really have high-quality, divided 4-lane highways. And for a lot of companies, that's enough. And you're nowhere in Stanley County where you can't easily get to a 4-lane highway. And so that's a tremendous improvement in our highway transportation network. And then how competitive is our cost of living? So, you know, what does a house cost? How has that changed over the last 3 or 4 years? Utilities and those costs, insurance, all of that factors in. And we could be asked any of these questions on any RFI, and we have to be prepared to answer. And, you know, the taxes and all of that, housing, all that changes very regularly, so we have to stay on top of it. It's a lot of information to try to package, and so we use our partnerships and we depend on them to create a proposal that is competitive, that's attractive, that's accurate, that we can, defend and build on if we happen to land a visit. And partnerships are a huge part of my day-to-day work. I saw Duke Energy today. Our representative Tammy Whaley was at a meeting in Baden. We interact with our utility providers regularly. Their rate structure is a huge part of making a deal. What will be the cost to extend utilities to a site or building, or what is the timeline, has become extremely critical, and in some cases a deal breaker, depending on where we are in the county and who the electrical provider is. The timeline and the cost are huge. So we try to stay in touch with our utilities partners to make sure that they know who we are, so when we call them, they pick up the phone and they answer quickly. Workforce development, touched on it earlier with the community college. We deal with workforce development agencies. I serve on the Central Iowa Workforce Development Board, which administers the NC Works contract. Dr. Enamite of the community college serves as an ex officio member of our advisory board. I see him regularly, and he has a fantastic staff that when I call, they respond quickly. Pfeiffer University, Dr. Bullard comes to our advisory board meetings. It gives regular updates about what's going on at Pfeiffer. And I serve on the Career and Technical Education Advisory Board for Stanley County Schools. So we're dialed into what's going on workforce, again, trying to predict what's coming, what's shrinking, and where the opportunities are for training. Touched a little bit about on transportation. I'll skip over that. And then other economic development agencies. One of my mentors at the state level uses the word collaboration, because it's like you have to collaborate, because sometimes projects are going to land in a region, and you want everyone to play nice in the region. You hope they come to your county, but if they don't, if they come to the region, then a supplier could come to your county, a smaller project. So we work intentionally with our partnering agencies at the regional level and at the state level to cultivate the relationships, because those regional and statewide partners also generate leads for us. So we generate leads internally for recruitment and retention, but our partner agencies also generate leads for us. So that's investment in jobs. They're going to Paris, they're going to Mexico, they're going to China, and meeting with companies saves us money on the recruiting front. But then when they bring the projects to our region, they've already been a little bit vetted, because the company has expressed interest in either the Charlotte region or the state of North Carolina. So we're not having to cast as wide of a net if we lean on our other economic development agencies. There's a federal agency as well that we've leveraged some grant monies with. County Manager Lucas has worked with Hillary Sherman with the national EDA, but we have received some direct grant money for infrastructure projects from that organization. I like this map. I'm proud of the map. This is a map that demonstrates our most recent announcements, and we've got the job and investment. Thanks to you all for helping move these across the finish line. But I think the more interesting story around the map is to show how the projects are spread out around the county. You don't see a high concentration of projects in any one geographical area. And I'm proud of that, because our goal is to create economic prosperity for all of our citizens. And so to bring high quality jobs and investment to the entire county, not just one municipality or one north, south, east, it says a lot about how we work in the county and how we submit for projects to ensure that that prosperity is spread out around the county. We have social media. We don't post every day. Anna Bridgman is largely responsible for our social media interactions. We do have Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. We have an email list you can sign up for, or we've signed you up for it once you were elected to office, so you can opt out of that anytime. General public can also receive our announcements. We like to broadcast our successes, but we also regularly send out information about wage and labor studies, programs that are available. Sometimes the statewide or national federal agencies will say, hey, please send this out to Stanley County citizens or the businesses on your list. So that's another way that we communicate and but we have several hundred people on our list, and we're working to grow that number. I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have. I appreciate the opportunity to tell you more about what we do.
Any questions?
I just want to appreciate everything, I want to appreciate everything you do. And I'm working with companies for incentives and stuff. I know there's people out here who are against incentives, but I think we've talked about, you may give them an incentive, but a lot of times people come in, they bring the money, but they don't fill out the paperwork to receive those incentives and stuff. And in the big scheme of things, that 3 to 5 year incentive, that goes by pretty fast, and then they're paying full taxes. But I appreciate everything you do, and especially the partnership with the community college. I remember, I just thought about it the other day, I was doing a work day with the college. It was like not even about 10 years ago, and going into the old cosmetology place. And in 2014, they were still using VHS tapes to cut hair from the 1980s. That's how old this stuff is, and I think County Manager Lucas has worked very well with the college to help us work in partnerships to get new buildings and new stuff to keep on with the future. But thank you, you've done a great job over there.
Thank you. And incentives are a part of what we do, but that's usually when you see me, but that's, believe it or not, a small fraction of how we help companies. So, thank you.
I would just like to say thank you very much as well. I didn't realize that you serve on so many boards, but I know that you must, and that you have to, and that you have got a lot of time in after hours. So we're very fortunate to have your knowledge and tenure.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? I appreciate, Candace, the opportunity that I've served on your board before. It was your board, but I've had many years of service, and I'm proud of you because you are already a Stanley County associate running another department, and we saw that you had the stamina and ability to be a good EDC director, and you've turned out to be a very good EDC director.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Okay, next in line is Bailey Klein, the Planning and Zoning Department. She's gonna come, and hopefully we're gonna deal with this ZA 2310 text amendment.
Come together, haven't we?
Bob, you coming?
Whatever, we flipped this around whichever, Bailey, partly because you've had it before, so I don't need to go
Her
into
name's on
much.
the presenter list, so.
If you would prefer Bailey, come on up, Bailey, if you want to. I'm flexible.
I don't care, go for it.
All right, well, good evening, Commissioners, Chairman Lawhorn, good to be with you. Hopefully for the last time dealing with this particular subject. Substantially commenced work or substantial expenditure. So we worked closely about a week ago, especially with our county attorney, Jenny Furr, trying to sort out how we could do this or what's appropriate. We've discovered a couple of things in that process, so it was probably good that this got tabled a bit so we could do this. One is dealing with the idea that, again, this whole idea of vested rights gets very complicated very quickly between common law and your site-specific languages. And what we discovered in looking closer back at the ordinance and things was two things, really. One is we had a definition, it was in the zoning ordinance, not in the subdivision ordinance, for what was called substantially commenced work. Okay, that's kind of the same thing as substantial expenditure. So in working this through, we thought, well, really what we need to do is replace that old definition and slip the language in here. Ms. Furr did some great work and found some other language in I'm trying to remember which county was it, Pitt County or something, anyhow. And did, kind of say, let's take some of what they've got and tweak it into what we had. And so that's where we come up with this language that's before you tonight. We also realized that common law vested rights are out there, but they're really more of a judicial case law sort of thing that establishes the length of time and all of that related to it. And luckily in our ordinance, already. It specifies in other places, talks about 2-year limits on major subdivisions and some other language that talk about length of time. So again, working with SPR, we kind of dropped some of that time frame language out of this. We took that Pitt County definition, some of what was recommended by the planning board earlier on, and the percentage is I guess I'd say is flexible at this point. It's really up to you, because what we decided, or why I put 20% in there still, is that was the original recommendation from the planning board. So that's what and we've not had, any other recommendation from the planning board, so that was the language. But feel free, again, I think that's certainly a topic that y'all can change to 25, 30, whatever's, or keep it at 20, whatever you think is there. The case law tends to point, especially in the common law vested right, to a fairly low standard for that, and I think I've sent that in your original memo in the previous meeting, but or Dr. Ekman did. So that's it's a fairly low standard for what the amount of work is. But again, I think we can work with that as the planning staff here in Stanley County. And I don't know, Ms. Furr has anything to add to this, because we met about it quite a few times in about a week ago trying to sort this out. I don't know if you want to say anything or not.
Mr. Chairman, if you would like me to, I can summarize my notes, or if you'd like to open it up for questions, I can attempt to answer those, whatever you prefer.
Well, Ms. Furr, I would love for you to do the presentation.
All right. Thank you. So Bob did a great job summarizing. I would sort of run through and hit the high spots. There are two kinds of vested rights. One is common law, that's established by a judge in court. The other kind is statutory, that comes from law or ordinance. And a vested right is essentially the time period that a particular development approval is valid, okay? So, in looking at our zoning ordinance and our subdivision ordinance, as Bob stated, there's already language in our ordinance that list out a time limit of 2 years for things such as special use permits, preliminary plat approvals for a major subdivision. So that 2-year time frame is already spelled out in the ordinance. So we felt like it was best to drop the time limit from the proposed definition of substantial expenditure. Okay, and once construction, this is per state law, once construction has substantially commenced, any statutory vesting expires if the work stops for 24 straight months, okay? And if a person, a developer, homeowner, property owner, if they are claiming a vested right per state statute, they can ask that Bob, as zoning administrator, determine whether or not they have a vested right, okay? And I feel like the purpose of this definition of substantial expenditure / substantially commenced work is to give Bob or any future zoning administrator a brighter guideline, a more clear guideline, so he or she can say, okay, this developer has or has not substantially commenced work. They have or have not spent enough money on this project to preserve their approval, okay? So essentially their approval is given for 2 years. And if the developer asks Bob to determine whether or not they have made enough progress to vest that right, to lock in their right, The draft definition as presented in your packet states, for the establishment of a statutory vested right, substantially commenced work or a substantial expenditure is hereby defined as 20% or more of the total estimated cost of the project as permitted, including cost of engineering, design, planning, grading, infrastructure, material, construction, erection, alteration, excavation, demolition, or similar work. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of explanation into our thought processes and the purpose of the definition. We'll be glad to answer any questions to the best of our ability.
Thank you. Any questions?
Yes.
Okay, Commissioner Barber.
Ms. Furr, could, what you're saying is because by law it says have to give them 2 years, you recommend leaving that 2 years out of the motion?
No, the 2 years is already specified in our ordinance. In section 907 of our ordinance, it already specifies the 2 years. Per state law, you can go anywhere from 2 years to 5 years for site-specific development plans. Since your ordinance already spells out 2 years, then there's really no need to duplicate the time frame in the definition of substantially commenced work / substantial expenditure.
I feel like that would be more of just making sure that it was the 2 years and not something that got changed and we didn't know about it. But also, would there even be after the 2 years? We're talking about if they've got substantial work done, giving them an extension. And that holds them to the same guidelines that they already have or they got approved by. Why can't we, in the 2 years, say you have to come back before the Planning and Zoning Committee and apply again? And all the new regulations would be upgraded. You have to follow those because you've got 2 years to do this. And at the end of those 2 years, instead of keeping extending it, just come up and say, okay, you've got to reapply again, and the new regulations for zoning will apply.
And if I understand your question, Vice Chairman Barbie, the definition would be used to determine at that point, at the end of 2 years, if they have completed a substantial amount of work, then they can carry on. Their approval continues. If they have not completed a substantial amount of work at that point, then they would have to come back and reapply for that
Correct.
approval.
Under the new regulations.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
That is correct.
Whatever that percentage, you determine what that percentage is. So
Right. What I'm getting at is you wouldn't need a percentage if you haven't gotten everything started by the first 2 years. You wouldn't need a percentage. You just come back and reapply again. That's what I'm saying. You don't just drop. All right, can I make and this is throwing this out if anybody don't like it, but.
You can't make a motion yet.
Okay.
because we have a public hearing that we did not close the last
Correct.
time. I think I'm correct.
That's right.
Well, then,
So-
can I suggest it to Ms. Furr so she would,
Sure, you can suggest it.
what I'd like to suggest is if this goes whatever, that I was asking for 33% before, which I thought was fair, substantial improvement, but I'm willing to drop down to 25% if that'll make it easier. But I think there should be a limit on the extension of 1 year. And at the end of that 1 year, you have to reapply again. Would that be a fair thing to say?
I believe the way the ordinance is written and looking at the state law, If the developer or property owner has made substantial expenditure during those 2 years, then they have a vested right.
To continue.
If they have not, then they have to start over.
Correct.
Ms. Furr, is that vested right, once that vested right is deemed in place, is that vested right forever?
As long as, my understanding, and Bob can chime in here, my understanding is as long as they continue work. But if they stop work for a period of 24 months, then they have to start over.
Correct.
So it's 2 years. Yeah, it's a 2-year running. If they perform 25%, they get 2 more years. Is that right, Bob?
It's just they gotta continue working on it. They
continue
can't go for 2 years without doing a thing.
That's right. Yeah.
That's right. There's
I think this,
reasonable progress should be made. And again, it becomes a bit subjective. I'll admit that. There's no doubt. But I'm not sure we can get around that based on statutes and case law.
what I'm trying to get by here is that we don't have developers that come in and start a development and keep getting extensions just to stay underneath the
the old
old
rules.
regulations and guidelines. I think at some point, they need to catch up and do what the county wants. So that was my idea. If we give them 2 years, when they get the permit to start with, and then if they've got 25% of the work done at the end of that 2 years, grant them a one-time, 1-year extension. And then if they don't, in 3 years' time, if they can't get everything rolling, then they need to come back and reapply again and meet the new regulations and guidelines.
And I think, based on my interpretation of our current ordinance and state law, and court cases, I believe that once they complete a substantial amount of work, if you were to set it at the 25%, once they complete that within that 2-year window, they would have the right to complete the project based on that initial approval, as long as they don't stop work
Right.
for 24 months straight.
So they could drag this out for 20 years if they wanted to then.
They still have to be working, making progress.
Right, I think they have to make progress.
They have to be making progress.
They have 24 months before we revisit it again, if we deem it 25%. 2 years, they're doing 25%, so we give them 2 more years.
That's right. If
Then we revisit it after 2 years.
Correct, yes, yeah, we would. And if they, if no progress has been made, then poof, your vested rights have ended, and then you've got to reapply under the current rules. So, yeah, so, but that's, again, the 2 years limit, that again goes, I guess, I'm trying to remember, that's more statutory, I think, than state, than case law, so.
I guess another way to phrase your question, Vice Chairman Barbie, would be, okay, if the developer completes 25% of the work in the first 2 years, what if the developer only does 5% more work over the next 2 years? Then what?
Right.
Is that?
Right, right.
And I think, Bob, I'll defer to you on that. If that were
Well-
to happen, as long as they're making,
Well, and the other thing to always remember is whoever's the zoning administrator at the time would potentially have to make a determination that, that is, at that point, you're not proceeding, you're not doing, is picking up a paper or painting the, future development here sign or putting up a new future development sign, is that substantial work? Probably not. So as a zoning administrator, you probably have to make a determination. The good thing about that is that's appealable. So if the developer thinks that the zoning administrator is being unfair, or if a next door neighbor or even the county board potentially thought that that was not true, then, it's appealable to the Board of Adjustment. Board of Adjustment can then make that ruling whether my, or whoever's in the zoning administrator's determination is correct or not. And of course, that can even go beyond the Board of Adjustment, because once the board's heard that appeal, whoever agrees or disagrees with that can take it to Superior Court and let a judge decide. And that's the way the system works.
Question, not to beat a dead horse,
Yeah.
but at the end of that 2 years, can we add on to it, or no, nothing else can be added on after, because it's already stated that you have 2 years to show however much, if we decide on 25%, so you can continue. Can you add on that? And so then, within the next 2 years, if you have not invested another 25%, totaling a 50% of your project, you know what I'm saying, at that point, or is that just going overboard?
Well, yeah.
Every 2 years, he's gonna have to complete at least 25% of that work. Every 2 years.
We could probably look at it that way. Again,
If he does 25% of the work the first 2 years and don't do anything for 2 more years, then it's not valid.
that's right. That's right, goes away. But if he's still making progress, I mean, and of course, I wish we always had a crystal ball to know what was happening. And I think some of the language in the land use law book that we have, which has 25 pages of information on this, if you're the developer and there's an economic downturn and you got to sit on the project for a while, or ask for new funding, or seek new investors, y'all been around, those things take time. Now, Mr. Eford, I know you faced one of these not that long ago with Whispering Hills, because that project sat there with 2 houses on it or whatever for, 3 years, 5 years? I don't know. It's a long time. And even some of the infrastructure was taken down in that project. So, but eventually, it's now one of the biggest neighborhoods in Locust. So, you do face those sorts of things that do happen. And I guess Whispering Hills is probably the best example I can think of in the region. But we've had situations, and I can show you the zoning map, just go on GIS, and you'll see all these old developments that were put into this county back in the 1950s, and right after World War II and that sort of thing, when everyone thought things were going to grow, and you have all these old, what we call old lot lines, and the roads were never finished. Property was never divided up and really sold, but these old lot lines exist, creating these neighborhoods that are more just on paper. And it does create a problem, Mr. Barbie, because, what law applies? And we ran into this a little bit with the Park West area, on that area of Poplin Grove Road not that long ago, because that was in the city's jurisdiction when some of those areas were created as subdivision, and now the city got rid of them and they came to the county's jurisdiction. How does that subdivision that was approved by the city apply in the county? And I don't have an answer to that to this day, because that's a confusing one. So it's a wonderful topic, and we could spend many more days talking about it. So,
Commissioner Shuta.
This would apply to not just developer, but commercial properties also.
it applies to any development project.
And I'm just thinking,
But keep, obviously, most commercial property work's going to happen in the municipalities, but you could, working with economic development or something, we could have a project somewhere out in the county. Even Charlotte Pike was partly in the county jurisdiction.
just back to Florida again, Highway 27, north of Lake Wales. I don't know what decade it was, but there was like a shopping center that was being built, and at some time, it just stopped.
Right.
And it sat there for decades. You drive by, it's just the wall with the thing up. So things can happen. The other thing I think of to keep in mind, our livestock arena is going to be finally finished this year. And that started in 2012, and they had things along the way. And that's our property, but if that were a commercial property, you could see things happening, that stalls, and then the financing. And I think it was the leveling of the ground was a problem at first. Was that costed the grading? The grading was a real big. It was unexpected cost. So you have these with these big projects. So Then the other fear is, so what happens, because elections happen and things change. And all of a sudden you get your whole new planning board people, you get a whole new set of people making decisions and someone's invested. It doesn't sound like much, but you could have a $30 million project. If you've invested 25% of that, that's over $8 million already.
Any other questions of Bob? Don't see any, so our public hearing was opened at the last meeting. So I'll ask, is there anybody here to speak for or against this change? Don't see anyone, so I'll declare the public hearing closed. Board members, what's your pleasure?
I'd like to make a motion that I'd like to make a motion to approve text amendment ZA 23-10 to change the 25% of substantial work to be done. And at the end of 2 years, there'd have to be another 2 years for 25% approval or any other ordinances. And that they must comply to the new ordinances.
And I just need clarification, the way you read that. So.
I don't have it just like.
Well, no, I'm just saying, so you're saying 25% within 2
25%
years.
First 2 years.
And then in another 2 years, they'd have to get another 25%, so they'd have to be 50% done
After 4 years.
in 4 years.
Isn't the text amendment stating 20% though? So we would have to deny it.
It is, no, you don't have to
You
deny
don't,
it.
we can change.
it.
Excuse me.
The original planning was 20%, but Vice Chairman Barbie said.
I really didn't want 33%, but I'm going to kind of compromise it.
Okay, so you're saying that 25% should be completed within 2 years,
Correct.
and that,
And then if they meet that requirement, then they can have a extension for another 2 years, provided they have 25% more.
25% or more.
Or more.
Complete. Ms. Furr, are we legal doing this?
I believe you are, Mr. Chairman, based on the public notice that was given. I believe it gives you area to determine the percentage, and the 20% that was in the draft definition, that just is the recommendation made by the planning board, and you're of course not bound by their recommendation.
Okay, thank you. So I think everyone's heard the motion of Vice Chairman Barbie. Do we have a second? Okay. Commissioner Hatley? You have any other discussion before we vote?
It's just clarification, because he said 25% for 2 years, then another 2 years, 25% more. So can that be subject to, I'm just asking in case it comes up. So is it 25% more of what was left over, or 25% from the beginning point? No, because seriously, because someone could say that if it's $100,000, you do 25,000, and then you say 25% more, you got it. I think you would have to specify 25% more of the original or the remaining, because 25% of the remaining is 25% of $75,000 rather than 25%. See what I'm saying? I mean, that's when you said that. Just I'm just trying to get
Your
a clarification to where you would say, but you'd have to almost put that in there. Or
Your cost, Commissioner Shudo, it can change during the project. So a percentage should be 25%, because a project may start out at $1 million. 25% of $1 million is 250,000. At the end of that 2 year period, you got 2 more to go. That project may have gone up to $1.2 million. So it should be, I think, in my opinion, should be a percentage, not a dollar amount.
of what number, the balance or what the new cost is?
I would
That's-
say what the projected new cost would be.
And last question, seriously, now what is it now before we make the change? The recommended 20, was it at 10% or? There was no percentage in there, okay.
Any other questions? Bob, you want to say anything else?
We will tweak the language to try to fit the intent of the motion.
Okay, we got him. Yes.
Chairman, if I may, share with the board one other thing. Once development is substantially underway under a statutory vested right, then that statutory right can become a common law vested right. And common law vested rights are very gray as far as work done, timeline for it to be done. So I would offer, if the board would like to table the final decision, to let us, if you want an incremental percentage, we will be glad to go back to the drawing board and come up with a proposal that says an incremental percentage. I'm not sure, because of the common law right, whether or not we can require 25%, 50% at various points throughout the process. But I guess the person could always go the common law right route, which is not necessarily black and white.
So you're asking that we table it?
That's up to the board, of course,
I
Mr. Chairman.
understand.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to go ahead with it, and if she looks into it and it comes up that we can't do this, then we can revise it. But I want to put this to bed. This is 3 different meetings we've had this at.
Any other comments, discussion before we vote? And I'm gonna ask, if you vote, please raise your right hand. We got a first and a second to the motion. All in favor, please raise your right hand. 5, 4, 2 against. Motion carries. Okay, got a consent agenda. I believe everybody's had time to look at it.
I make a motion, we approve the consent.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Commissioner comments. Commissioner Crump?
I would just like to say this past Saturday morning at the Martin Luther King prayer breakfast, that it was an honor to be there and to hear the speakers. I wish I had some of the names to say now, but they just did a wonderful job. It was like going to church. I think you said that as we came in. It was a great time with a lot of the leaders in the county and just community members who wanted to recognize Martin Luther King as the great hero and man that he was. So it was very hopeful, and it made for a great day.
Okay. You're good, Commissioner Hatley? Okay. Vice Chairman Barbie? Okay. Commissioner Heford?
No comment, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. No comment. Peter, you got something to
I
say?
used my words on Florida talk today, so I'm not going to keep it going any longer.
Okay. All right. And I failed to bring my phone in, and I was going to give you some updates on building permits, which are down, I think. This is from I tell you what, I'm not going to do it from recollection. I'm gonna do it next time, but there is a decline in new home residential permits. It's not as great as I thought it would be, but, new homes are slowing down. But I also want to say, interest rates on mortgages. I was, at URA Bank today, and I saw where the 30-year, this was on a Dow NASDAQ listing, but 30-year mortgage rates, 15-year mortgage rates are in the 6 to 6.5 to 6 3/4 range, which is not a bad interest rate. We all have short-term memories, and all we can remember is that they got down to 2.5%, and thought that was the norm. That is not the norm. Probably 5, 6, 7% is probably gonna be the norm. So if you're thinking about buying a house, get out there and find one and get you a mortgage while the rates are in the 6% range. If I don't have anything else, I need a motion to
I
adjourn.
make a motion, we adjourn.
Motion, second, all in favor, let's go home. Thank you.